The breakfast room was a cathedral of control. Chandeliers dripped crystal light onto polished mahogany, and the air carried the scent of imported Ethiopian beans, rich, earthy, expensive. But underneath that aroma, Tonia caught something else. Something that didn't belong. A faint, metallic bitterness. Sharp. Chemical. Her hands never stopped moving, pouring cream, arranging silver spoons with military precision, but her eyes locked onto the cup in front of Lukk Ethan. The steam rising from the porcelain wasn't pure. There was a shimmer to it, an oily distortion that made her stomach clench. Everyone in the room thought the boss was about to drink his morning coffee. Only Tonia knew he was about to die. She had survived the streets by learning to see what powerful people ignored: the tremor in a hand, the hesitation before a smile, the gaps in the air where danger lived. And right now, every instinct she'd honed in back alleys and gambling dens was screaming at her. Clara Nest sat across from Lukk, her diamond-laden fingers resting delicately on the table, her expression the picture of loving devotion. But Tonia had watched her pour that coffee. Had seen the micropause. The way Clara's shoulder angled just slightly to block the sightline from the guards. The room was filled with men in black suits, Lukk's brother Junyoung near the door, for more security scattered like statues along the walls. Men who could kill with their hands. Men who were trained to notice everything. But none of them were looking at the coffee. Because maids were furniture. Invisible. Beneath notice. Tonia's pulse hammered against her ribs, but her face remained blank, professional. She had maybe 3 seconds before Lukk lifted that cup to his lips. 3 seconds to decide if she wanted to stay invisible, or if she was willing to bet her life that she was right. The problem with being invisible was simple. If you were wrong, no one would hear your screams. If you were right, you'd never be invisible again. Tonia took a breath that tasted like metal and expensive coffee and made her choice. She moved. Subscribe to see how this unfolds and comment where you're watching from. I will love to say hello to you just to know how far our story is going. Tonia's hip caught the edge of the serving cart. It wasn't graceful. The cream pitcher wobbled, porcelain rattled against silver, and her hand shot out in a performance of panicked correction that would have won awards in another life. "Oh, I'm so sorry, sir." The words tumbled out breathless and mortified as she lunged forward, steadying the cart with one hand while the other swept across the table in a blur of white sleeve and practiced desperation. Her fingers brushed Lukk's cup, the poisoned one, and in the chaos of clinking china and muttered apologies, she switched it with Clara's. The whole thing took 2 seconds. Clara's eyes widened, her mouth opening in theatrical shock. "Careful. You almost." But Tonia was already retreating, her head bowed, hands clasped in front of her apron. "Forgive me, Mr. Ethan. I don't know what happened. I'm so clumsy this morning." Her voice trembled perfectly. Just the right amount of fear. Just enough shame. The guards hadn't moved. Why would they? A maid had stumbled. It happened. But Lukk's hand, which had been reaching for his coffee, stopped mid-air. His tattooed fingers hovered above the cup, Clara's cup now, and for one terrible infinite moment, the entire room held its breath. Lukk Ethan didn't blink. His hand stayed suspended over the coffee, steam curling around his knuckles where ink-black tattoos twisted into symbols Tonia couldn't read. His eyes, dark, bottomless, calculating, shifted from the cup to Tonia's face. She felt the weight of that stare like a blade against her throat. He knew. He had seen the swap. Or maybe he'd felt it, the fractional shift in air pressure, the wrong angle of porcelain against wood. Men like Lukk Ethan didn't survive in his world by being oblivious. The silence stretched. Became suffocating. Clara's smile faltered at the edges, her jeweled hand moving to touch his arm. "Darling, your coffee's getting cold." But Lukk didn't look at her. He was still watching Tonia, his expression unreadable, his body language a study in dangerous stillness. In the corner of the room, one of the guards shifted his weight, a predator sensing disruption. Tonia kept her eyes down, her breathing shallow. If he drank from Clara's cup, the clean one, she was safe. If he questioned her, demanded to know why she'd touched his coffee, why she'd broken protocol, her life would end in this room. Quietly. Efficiently. Lukk's fingers curled. He picked up the cup. And set it back down without drinking. "This coffee," he said, his voice low and precise, "tastes different today." Clara's hand froze on his sleeve. The air in the room changed. It was subtle, a shift in temperature, a tightening of invisible threads. The guard's shoulders squared. Their casual alertness sharpened into something predatory. Tonia's heart slammed against her ribs, but she kept her face neutral, her hands still clasped in front of her apron. She had gambled everything on this moment, and now the wheel was spinning. Clara recovered with the speed of someone trained in deception. Her expression morphed into concern, then indignation, her diamond earrings catching the light as she turned sharply toward Tonia. I poured it myself this morning. The same beans we always use. Unless. She let the word hang, venomous. Unless someone interfered with it. Tonia felt every eye in the room pivot to her. The guards' postures shifted, no longer decorative but operational. Hands moved closer to concealed weapons. I only steadied the cart, ma'am, Tonia said quietly, her voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding her veins. I didn't touch anything else. You bumped the table. Clara's voice was silk wrapped around steel. You disrupted the entire breakfast. And now my fiancé says his coffee tastes wrong. She leaned forward, her rings clicking against the table. Do you understand what happens to people who disrespect Mr. Ethan's table? Who touch things that don't belong to them? The threat was crystal clear. Lukk still hadn't moved. His gaze drifted from Tonia to Clara, then back to the two cups sitting side by side on the table. Identical porcelain. Identical steam. But something in his expression had sharpened. A predator catching the scent of blood. Clara, he said softly, which cup did you pour for me? The question landed like a gunshot. Clara's pupils dilated, just a fraction, just enough. The one on your right, of course. The one I always. Then drink from the left one. Silence. Clara's smile locked into place, but her fingers tightened around the edge of the table. Why would I? Drink it. It wasn't a request. The breakfast room became a vacuum. No one breathed. No one moved. Clara's face was a mask of confusion and wounded innocence, but Tonia could see the micro-tremors in her jaw, the way her throat worked as she swallowed. Lukk, I don't understand why you're. Now. The door to the breakfast room opened. Junyoung entered without knocking, his movements smooth and deliberate, his suit jacket unbuttoned to reveal the shoulder holster beneath. He was leaner than Lukk, but there was something more volatile in his energy, a coiled spring wrapped in expensive fabric. He closed the door behind him. The click of the lock was barely audible, but every person in the room heard it. Problem. Junyoung's voice was casual, but his eyes scanned the table, the guards, Tonia, Clara, the coffee cups. He positioned himself in front of the exit, hands clasped loosely in front of him. No one was leaving. We're clarifying something, Lukk said, still watching Clara. About the coffee. Junyoung's eyebrow lifted. He looked at Tonia, then at the cups, and something like understanding flickered across his face. He pulled out his phone, typed a quick message, and pocketed it again. Within 30 seconds, 2 more guards entered from the kitchen entrance. They didn't speak. They simply took positions at the other exits, their faces blank, their hands visible but ready. The breakfast room had become a cage. Junyoung walked to the table, his footsteps silent on the Persian rug. He picked up the silver spoon next to Clara's cup, the one that had been meant for Lukk, and held it up to the light. His expression didn't change, but his eyes narrowed. Interesting, he said quietly. He set the spoon down with surgical precision. The staff. All of them. I want names, schedules, and background checks on my desk in 10 minutes. One of the guards pulled out a tablet and started typing. Clara's breathing had become shallow. This is ridiculous. I'm being treated like a criminal because the maid is clumsy. The maid, Junyoung interrupted, his voice soft and lethal, hasn't said a word. You, on the other hand, have been talking quite a lot. He turned to Tonia. You, maid, come here. Tonia's legs felt like water, but she moved. She approached the table, her eyes downcast, her hands trembling just enough to sell the performance. Junyoung studied her face. Why did you swap the cups? The room went still. Clara's mouth opened, but Lukk raised one finger and she fell silent. Tonia looked up, meeting Junyoung's eyes for the first time. She had survived this long by knowing when to hide and when to strike. This was the strike. Because, she said, her voice quiet but clear, the coffee on the right had something in it that didn't belong. Junyong's expression didn't change, but the air around him sharpened.
Explain.
Tonia's mind raced through the calculations she'd made in those critical seconds before the swap. She pointed to the silver spoon resting next to Clara's cup, the cup that had been meant for Lukk.
The silver, sir. It tarnished.
Lukk leaned forward slightly. The first real movement he'd made since setting down the cup. Silver doesn't tarnish from coffee, Junyong said.
No, sir. It doesn't.
Tonia kept her voice steady, clinical. But certain compounds, alkaline substances, sulfur-based chemicals, they react with silver.
Create a dark film.
I noticed it when I was arranging the spoons. The one next to Mr. Ethan's cup had a discoloration that wasn't there when I polished it this morning. She gestured toward the spoon. In the harsh light of the chandeliers, there was indeed a faint, oily darkness along the edge where it had touched the liquid. Junyong picked up the spoon again, tilting it. His jaw tightened. The coffee's acidity should have masked it, Tonia continued, but whatever was added created a reaction. The steam had an oily shimmer.
Wrong viscosity.
And the smell, she paused, choosing her words carefully. It smelled like almonds underneath the coffee.
Bitter almonds.
Lukk's eyes flickered. Every person in that room who knew anything about poisons understood what bitter almonds meant. Cyanide. Clara's face had gone white. That's absurd. She's making this up. She probably put something in the coffee herself and now she's trying to. Then drink it, Lukk said again, his voice cutting through her protest like a scalpel.
Prove her wrong.
The cup sat between them, steam still rising in lazy spirals. Clara's hand moved toward it, then stopped. Her fingers were shaking. I don't have to prove anything to a maid, she said, but her voice had lost its edge.
This is insulting. I won't be. Junyong moved.
One smooth step and he was beside Clara, the spoon in his hand. He dipped it into the cup she'd poured, the one meant for his brother, and lifted it. A single drop of coffee clung to the silver, and even from where Tonia stood, she could see the dark film spreading across the metal's surface. Interesting, Junyong said again. He set the spoon down and pulled out his phone. I'm calling Dr. Huang. He'll test this. Should take about 15 minutes. Clara's composure finally cracked.
No, wait.
The word came out strangled, desperate. Lukk tilted his head, studying his fiancée the way a scientist might study a specimen under glass.
No.
Clara's hand flew to her chest, her diamonds glittering as her fingers clutched at the neckline of her dress.
This is humiliating. Being accused by the help.
Having my love for you questioned because of some paranoid theory about spoons. Then drink it, Lukk said for the third time. His voice was barely above a whisper, but it filled the room like thunder. Clara stared at the cup. Her hand reached out, trembling visibly now, no longer able to hide it, and her fingers wrapped around the delicate porcelain handle. She lifted it, brought it halfway to her lips, and stopped. The tremor in her hand intensified. Coffee sloshed against the sides of the cup, threatening to spill. Her face had gone from white to gray, a sheen of sweat visible on her forehead despite the cool air. Her voice cracked. I don't feel well suddenly. I think I might be coming down with something. Maybe I should. Drink. Lukk's face was carved from stone. No anger. No betrayal. Just cold, calculating assessment. Clara's eyes filled with tears. Real ones this time, not the practiced kind she used for manipulation. Please, she whispered. Lukk, please, I can explain.
Then explain.
The cup rattled against the saucer as Clara set it down, her hands shaking too violently to hold it. She pressed her palms flat against the table, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. They have my sister, she said, the words tumbling out in a rush. The Kozlov crew. They have Miriam. They said if I didn't do this, they would. A sob choked off her words. The room absorbed this information in silence. Junyong exchanged a look with Lukk. Something passed between them, a conversation conducted entirely in glances and micro-expressions. Then Junyong pulled out his phone again and made a call. Miriam Nest, he said into the phone. Find her. Now. The guards moved. It wasn't dramatic. There were no drawn weapons, no shouted commands. but the 4 men who had been stationed around the room's perimeter shifted their positions with fluid precision, creating a tighter circle around the table. Around Clara. The message was clear. The fiancée was no longer protected. She was contained. Clara seemed to shrink in her chair, her designer dress and expensive jewelry suddenly looking like costume pieces on an actress who'd forgotten her lines. She was crying openly now, mascara tracking dark lines down her cheeks. "They took her 3 days ago," she said, her voice broken and small. "They sent me a video. She was tied to a chair. They had a gun to her head. They said all I had to do was..." Another sob. "All I had to do was add the powder to your coffee. Just this once. And they'd let her go." Lukk's expression still hadn't changed. "And you believed them?" "It wasn't a question. What choice did I have?" Clara's hands twisted together, her rings catching the light. "She's my baby sister. She's only 22. She doesn't have anything to do with any of this. They took her because of me. Because I'm with you." "No," Lukk said quietly. "They took her because you were weak enough to compromise. Because you didn't come to me. How could I? You would have saved her." Junyoung's voice cut across hers, hard and cold. "We would have found her within hours. The Kozlov crew doesn't have the infrastructure to hide someone from us. Not in this city." He looked at his phone as it buzzed. "In fact, we found her 20 minutes ago." Clara's head snapped up. "What?" "She's fine. Scared, but unharmed. She's being transported to a safe house as we speak." Junyoung's smile was thin and sharp. "See, Clara, the thing about betrayal is that it requires a certain kind of intelligence. You needed to make us believe you hadn't been compromised. Coming to breakfast as usual. Pouring coffee as usual. Smiling as usual." He gestured to Tonia. "But you didn't account for someone who actually pays attention. Someone who notices when the silver tarnishes. When the steam shimmers. When the woman pouring coffee moves her shoulder just slightly to block the sightline." Clara's face crumpled. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't know what else to do." "You should have trusted me," Lukk said. His voice was soft, almost gentle, which made it more terrifying than if he'd shouted. "That was your only job. To trust me." He stood. The movement was elegant, controlled, final. "Get her out." Clara lurched to her feet, her chair scraping against the floor. "No, please, Lukk, I love you. You tried to kill me." His voice was flat, emotionless. "Love doesn't factor into that equation." "I didn't want to. They forced me. You made a choice." Lukk buttoned his suit jacket with precise movements. "You chose to believe the Kozlovs over me. You chose to bring poison into my home. You chose to pour it with your own hands." He looked at her, and for the first time, something flickered in his eyes. Disappointment. "You chose wrong. It was one mistake. It's the only mistake that matters." 2 guards moved to Clara's sides. They didn't touch her yet. They didn't need to. She was trapped between them, her escape routes closed, her future narrowing to a single dark point. Junyoung stepped closer, his phone in his hand. "The Kozlovs sent the video 3 days ago. You could have come to us immediately. Instead, you spent 72 hours planning how to murder my brother." His voice was clinical, detached. "That's not duress. That's premeditation. But my sister is safe. Will remain safe. Will be protected for the rest of her life, in fact." Junyoung tilted his head. "Unlike you." Clara's legs gave out. The guards caught her before she hit the floor, holding her upright by her arms. Her expensive dress was crumpled now, her diamonds somehow looking cheap in the harsh morning light. "Where are you taking me?" Her voice was barely a whisper. Lukk didn't answer. He simply nodded to the guards. They led her toward the door. She tried to resist, her heels scraping against the floor, but it was useless. They were professionals. She was a civilian. The outcome was never in doubt. At the threshold, she twisted around, her tear-stained face desperate. "Tonia." She fixed her eyes on the maid, still standing quietly by the serving cart. "This is your fault. If you hadn't interfered, I would be dead," Lukk said calmly. "And you would be a murderer. At least this way, you only have to live with being a traitor."
The door closed behind her.
The silence that followed was absolute. The breakfast room held its breath. Outside, footsteps echoed down the corridor, Clara's heels and the guard's boots, moving in synchronized rhythm toward whatever fate Lukk had decided for her. The sound faded gradually, swallowed by the vast emptiness of the penthouse.
Tonia realized she was shaking. Not from fear. Not anymore.
From the sheer adrenaline crash of having survived a situation that should have killed her twice over, once from the poison, once from the accusation. Junyoung pocketed his phone and looked at his brother. The Kozlovs will expect confirmation of success within the hour.
Let them expect.
Lukk returned to his chair, sitting with the same perfect posture as before, as if the last 15 minutes hadn't just completely upended his life.
Send them a message. Make sure it's clear. What do you want it to say? That we know. That we have their mole. And that we're coming.
Junyoung smiled.
It was not a pleasant expression. Consider it done.
He paused at the door, glancing back at Tonia.
The maid stays. Lukk's eyes followed his brother's gaze.
For the first time since the coffee incident, he looked at Tonia, really looked at her. Saw past the uniform and the downcast eyes to the sharp mind and sharper instincts that had saved his life.
Yes, he said. She stays.
The door clicked shut behind Junyoung, leaving only Lukk and Tonia in the cathedral-like breakfast room. The remaining guards had retreated to their posts, becoming part of the furniture again.
Invisible. Like she used to be.
Tonia stood by the serving cart, her hands clasped in front of her apron, her heart still hammering against her ribs. She didn't know what came next. She'd saved the boss's life, yes. But she'd also broken every rule of her position.
She'd touched his coffee. Disrupted his breakfast. Made herself visible. In this world, visibility could be a death sentence.
Lukk picked up his cup, the one Tonia had swapped, the clean one, and took a slow sip. He set it down with deliberate care, the porcelain making the softest clink against the saucer.
Come here, he said.
Tonia's feet moved before her brain caught up. She approached the table, stopping at a respectful distance.
Too close would be presumptuous. Too far would be insulting. Closer. She took another step.
Close enough now to see the fine details of his tattoos, the precise way his tie was knotted, the absolute stillness in his body that marked him as someone who had learned to control every muscle, every breath, every micro-expression.
What's your name?
Tonia, sir.
Tonia Reed. How long have you worked here? 3 months, sir.
And in those 3 months, how many assassination attempts have you prevented? Despite everything, Tonia felt a ghost of a smile tug at her lips.
Just the one, sir.
Lukk's mouth didn't move, but something in his eyes shifted.
Almost like amusement. Almost like respect.
Tell me, Tonia Reed, what did you think would happen when you swapped those cups?
It was a test. She knew it. The wrong answer would make her a liability. The right answer would change everything.
I thought, she said carefully, that if I was wrong, I would be executed for touching your coffee. And if I was right, I would be executed for making your fiancé look guilty. Either way, I'd probably die.
But at least one way, you'd live. So you chose my life over yours. No, sir. Tonia met his eyes.
I chose to stop pretending I didn't see what I saw.
There's a difference.
This time, Lukk's mouth did move.
The faintest curve at the corner. Not quite a smile. But close. Yes, he said quietly. There is.
He stood, and Tonia instinctively took a step back. But Lukk simply walked to the window, his hands clasped behind his back, looking out over the city that sprawled below them, a kingdom of steel and glass and secrets. My father used to say that loyalty is the only currency that matters in our world, he said.
Money can be stolen. Power can be taken.
But loyalty, real loyalty, is something you can't fake.
He turned back to face her. Clara had money. She had power. She had access to everything I could give her.
But when it mattered, she didn't have loyalty.
Tonia didn't respond.
Some statements didn't need responses. You, on the other hand, Lukk continued, have been here for 3 months. You've polished silver and poured coffee and stayed invisible. I didn't even know your name until 2 minutes ago.
You had no reason to risk your life for me. No investment in my survival. No expectation of reward.
I had a reason,
Tonia said quietly.
Oh. People like Clara, people who've never had to fight for anything, they don't understand that some battles aren't about winning.
They're about refusing to lose quietly. She paused. I've been invisible my whole life, sir. Poor, black, female, a maid. I'm used to being overlooked.
But I'm not used to watching someone die when I could have stopped it.
That's a different kind of invisible. That's becoming nothing.
Lukk studied her in silence. Then he walked back to the table and picked up the silver spoon, the one that had tarnished from the poison. He held it up to the light, examining the dark film. Junyong will need people like you, he said.
People who see what others miss. People who act when it matters. He set the spoon down. But I need something different.
Tonia's stomach tightened.
Sir.
I need someone I can trust to stand next to me when I eat.
When I drink.
When I sleep. Someone who understands that in my world, the most dangerous weapons aren't guns or knives. They're the things you're supposed to be able to trust.
Coffee poured by your fiancé. Food prepared by your chef. Pills given by your doctor.
His gaze fixed on her, intense and unwavering.
Someone who won't ignore the gaps in the air.
Understanding crashed over Tonia like a wave.
You want me to be your taster.
I want you to be my eyes, Lukk corrected.
Tasting is part of it.
But mostly, I want you to keep noticing the things other people pretend not to see.
The shimmer in the steam. The tarnish on the silver. The woman who moves her shoulder to block the sightline.
He pulled out a business card, heavy stock, minimalist design, and set it on the table.
This is the number for my personal attorney. Call him today.
He'll arrange for a new employment contract. Salary 10 times what you're making now. Housing in the secure wing of the building.
Full protection detail. Medical. Dental.
Security clearance level 3.
Tonia stared at the card. Her entire life was about to change. No more invisibility.
No more staying small and quiet and beneath notice.
And if I say no?
Lukk's expression didn't change. Then you receive a severance package worth 6 months' salary, a glowing reference, and my gratitude. You'll never work as a maid again, not because I'll stop you, but because you've proven you're capable of much more than polishing silver.
That's generous.
No, Lukk said.
It's fair. You saved my life. You earned the choice.
Tonia picked up the business card. The paper was thick between her fingers, real and solid.
A lifeline. An escape route. Or maybe both.
I spent my whole life trying to be invisible, she said quietly.
Learning to disappear. To not take up space. To let powerful people believe I was furniture. She looked up at him.
What you're offering me, it's the opposite of that.
Yes. It's dangerous. Yes. People will try to kill me. Probably.
And if I fail to notice something, if I miss the shimmer in the steam, you die.
Yes.
Tonia slipped the business card into her apron pocket.
When do I start?
Lukk's mouth curved into something that might have been a smile.
You already have.
Sit down, Tonia.
Let's finish breakfast.
She hesitated for only a second. Then she pulled out the chair that had been Clara's, expensive leather, still warm from where the fiancé had sat, and lowered herself into it.
The position felt wrong. Presumptuous. Like wearing someone else's skin.
But Lukk was already pouring fresh coffee from a new carafe, his movements precise and deliberate. He filled 2 cups, one for himself, one for her, and slid hers across the table. From now on, he said, we drink from the same pot.
Eat from the same kitchen. Share the same risks. He lifted his cup.
If someone wants me dead, they'll have to kill you first.
Tonia picked up her cup. The porcelain was warm in her hands.
The coffee smelled clean, no metallic bitterness, no oily shimmer. Just rich, earthy Ethiopian beans.
To gaps in the air, she said. To people who notice them, Lukk replied.
They drank together as morning light flooded the breakfast room, turning the chandeliers into constellations of fire. Outside, the city continued its ruthless churn, deals made and broken, empires built and destroyed, loyalty tested and found wanting. But in that moment, in that room, 2 people sat across from each other and understood a simple truth. Sometimes survival isn't about being the strongest or the richest or the most powerful. Sometimes it's about being the one who sees what others choose to ignore. And Tonia Reed had been seeing those things her entire life. Now she just had to stay alive long enough to use it. 3 weeks later, Tonia stood in the same breakfast room, but everything had changed. She no longer wore the traditional maid's uniform. Instead, she was dressed in a tailored black suit with a crisp white shirt, professional, sharp, impossible to ignore. Her hair was still pulled back, but now it was styled, not hidden. A small silver pin on her lapel marked her new position, a Korean character that meant, eyes. The breakfast table was set for 4. Lukk sat at the head, Junyoung to his right. Across from Junyoung sat a young woman with Clara's cheekbones and terrified gratitude in her eyes. Vivian, recovered from the Tsoi basement 2 days after Clara's departure. Her wrists still bore faint bruises, but she was alive, safe, and under the protection of the family that her sister had tried to destroy. Tonia poured the coffee herself, checking each cup with the precision that had become her signature. The silver spoons gleamed without tarnish. The steam rose pure and clean. Lukk caught her eye and nodded, a small gesture that meant everything was as it should be. As Tonia stepped back, her phone vibrated silently in her pocket. A message from the security team. Suspicious delivery at service entrance. Holding for your inspection. She excused herself with a subtle hand signal that Lukk understood immediately. As she walked toward the door, she caught her reflection in the breakfast room's antique mirror. The invisible maid was gone. In her place stood a woman who'd learned that sometimes the most dangerous power wasn't in being overlooked. It was in choosing when to be seen. She smiled slightly and headed for the service entrance. There was always another threat to catch. Another cup of coffee that smelled wrong. Another life to save. Tonia had become very, very good at her job. If you love this story of courage, betrayal, and redemption, like this video, subscribe for more thrilling tales, and comment below which character was your favorite. Was it Tonia's sharp instincts, Lukk's cold control, or Clara's desperate choice? Drop a comment and let me know. Don't forget to hit that notification bell so you never miss when the next story drops. Your support means everything, and I can't wait to bring you more incredible stories. See you in the next one.